unnecessary intro song to totally waste your time.
Who is Sam Harris, you might ask? Well, maybe most of you might not be asking this. I'm guessing that most of the 4 people that listen to this, at least 2 of you, know who Sam Harris is already. But for those who don't, and for just a refresher course, Sam Harris is a philosopher and a pundit who stakes most of his claims in the areas of neuroscience. That's pretty much, I think that's a really good summation. Neuroscience, brain science. He's interested in the science of the brain, mostly. Of course, all of his hobbies revolve around that. He's known mostly for things that where we agree. I agree with Sam. I probably have more in common with Sam than almost any other person in the media, including Milo. You heard me talking about Milo. I've got more in common with Sam. Hell, Milo's pretending to be a Catholic. Sam got famous for his criticisms of Islam, and his criticisms of Christianity, and his criticisms of Judaism. Who does that sound like? By the way, he was also born just a couple months before me. Same age. However, Sam, where I was born into religion, the Mormon religion, a religion that Sam often cites to show the differences between a religion that can take a joke and a religion where jokes are forbidden. Islam. Islam cannot take a joke. Mormons can take a joke. And I was born into Mormonism, so fun. I was born into the religion that Sam Harris fears least and uses most often, as an example of religion that's not nearly as bad as most of them. So you kind of got to take it where you can get it. And I agree with him there too, believe it or not. Even though I, turned my back on Mormonism for many of the reasons that he outlines in his criticisms of all religion. So we have a lot in common there. Oh, also, I have a tattoo of B. Arthur on my arm. It's B, as a queen bee. She's got her stinger, and she's fucking the word fantastic in the A-hole, meaning the A of the hole. B fucking fantastic. Get it? What's the connection there? Well, Sam's mom was the producer of The Golden Girls. That's right. His dad was an actor. I don't know who was in. But so Sam's a product of Hollywood. Literally. Dad's an actor, mom's a producer. Golden Girls was the main product. So that's pretty cool, right? Sam also had some epiphanies, when doing a couple of drugs. MDMA is the big one for him when he went to Stanford. So he was a smart kid. So you don't just... Well, actually, we don't know now, right? We don't know whether kids are smart. When they get into Stanford, we always assume that they're smart. But now we know that when you're from Hollywood and your parents have money and they're influential, that you can get into a school if you want to get into a school. I mean, we've all known that. Everybody knows that. So when Sam was a kid, he had an epiphany, much like I did, that all of a sudden you take MDMA, and I think we both had the exact same epiphany. We thought, wait a minute, shit, is love literally just a chemical reaction? Are the feelings of love and empathy actually just chemicals? Is it just science? Oh gosh, that's a hard one. That's a hard one. So Sam's the way he dealt with that is he cruised over to India, as many young white boys do, to pursue, a spiritual enlightenment through meditation. And it seems his method was, maybe if I can meditate, if I close my eyes, I can produce the chemicals that MDMA released or allowed to be released within me. Because that's what MDMA does. Don't quote me on this, but from what I understand, MDMA, what it really does is it releases your own serotonins. In other words, you always have a reserve of serotonins available to you. I don't know where it's stored. I'm no scientist. But the way I understand it, let's imagine there's this little place, a little pocket of serotonins, and your body uses them as necessary to regulate your mood. And if you get a good hug from somebody, sometimes the serotonins are released with the hug. And, one might imagine that the body is saying, this is a good thing. Here's your reward for bonding with another person, and hopefully you'll get a boner, and insert that boner into an orifice, squirt some liquid out, and another human will be born. And furthermore, if you hug your neighbor, that will increase the chances are you're going to have a tribe, and the more people you have in your tribe, the more likely it is that your offspring will be protected, and survive. So, pretty rational way to look at things. But it seems Sam went looking and pursuing meditation, and I'm guessing, I can't say, I haven't read all of his books, but, before I forget, Sam is doing all this when he's 19 years old. 19 years old. That's funny because, another parallel, when I was 19, I went on a Mormon mission to Brazil to pursue my own spiritual path by converting people to Mormonism, right? So I'm in Brazil, and since we're the same age, we're literally doing these things at the same time. He's over in India, checking out why his MDMA worked, trying to figure out a way to do it to himself, and I'm over in Brazil, converting people, and I don't know why, I'm no psychoanalyst, but Sam is a psychoanalyst, and psychoanalysis is fun. He does it, and so I'm doing it too. And I don't think it's unfair to assume that Sam, on his spiritual quest in India, after having taken MDMA, might have been thinking, how can I take control of these thoughts in my mind by meditating? If it's all chemical, how can I do it? And I assume that he might have been wondering about all thoughts, not just love, but confusion, hatred, morality. Maybe morality isn't just a thing that's passed down with these books and these religions, but maybe morality, love, charity, hate, is simply a chemical reaction, and maybe I can become the master of my chemical factory. That seems to be what motivated him and what he was searching for, right? And it sounds as if that he's had some satisfactory results in those regards. Seems as if, because of the things that he writes, and that he thinks that you can rationally approach morality. And bless his heart, and I don't say that in a condescending way, I mean it. I benefit from Sam, and I'm glad that he exists, and I love that he's come to so many same conclusions as I have. But he and I have a big disconnect. I feel like he's got a big, huge blind spot. But it's a blind spot that he's addressed. Well, he hasn't addressed the blind spot. He's addressed the background problems that probably result in his blind spot that he's not even seeing. And that is that he's developing faith anyway. He has faith anyway. He has turned to faith anyway, even though he sees no rational reason for faith, And, okay, so let's look back. So he goes to Stanford, and he starts, after this MDMA thing, he's going, I want to figure out how this goddamn brain thing works, How can I take control of my body without having to spend money on drugs? I'm imposing my frugality on him. But for me, it's cheap. Wait, if my brain can do that, is there a way I can do that without having to pay anything? That's the way I think. But so Sam's in there, and he's taking pictures of the brain. He decides to hook up MRIs to people's brains, right? And he thinks, well, I want to see what the difference is between spiritual people. Because really what happens is MDMA is, you can call it a spiritual experience. I'm guessing he might have done ayahuasca too and other psychedelics. But the closest thing that they resemble is what everybody else describes as a spiritual experience. So, he's thinking, you put a chemical in, you have a spiritual experience. How does that work? I want to look at the brain. Now, he doesn't saw brains open. He doesn't pull them out or poke them around like a brain surgeon. But he looks into neuroscience and this amazing thing called an MRI. Small f MRI. I don't know what the small f stands for. But the MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, is that what it stands for? Is that the R? So he wants to compare spiritual people with non-spiritual people. And he hooks them up to the MRI, and he asks them a bunch of questions, and he starts seeing activity in certain parts of the brain. He starts going, okay, this section is where belief happens, this section is where it doesn't happen. Oh, write it down, take a picture, compare the brains of spiritual and non-spiritual. It all sounds like a lot of fun, honestly, right? It's a kind of reason why, when I think of reasons to go to school, access to labs like this, time just to write things down, equipment, love it. Get a bunch of guys in white coats, start doing experiments. Absolutely fantastic. Now, and I haven't delved into his research, but I know the way it comes out of his mouth when he talks about it. Somehow during his research, he's determined, as this seems like duh, he's determined that spiritual people have different parts of their brains activated when confronted with true or false statements based on belief than non-religious people. This is when I say duh, I don't want to demean him or anything, but I don't think you need to hook up the MRI to do this. If there's a person who's religious and you say, Jesus was a chronic masturbator, you're probably going to get a frown on their face. I don't like the way that sounds. I don't like it. Whereas a person who never heard of Jesus, you say Jesus was a chronic masturbator, they go, so? And? What's your point? In other words, you don't really need the MRI. Right? It doesn't seem like Sam's, what we're talking about here, it seems to me, is like, well, if a person already believes a certain thing and you challenge it, then they're going to react a certain way. I would expect their facial expressions to be different. And facial expressions originate in the brain too, right? What I'm basically trying to say is, I'm a skeptic that out skeptics the skeptics. out skepticizes, out. In other words, I'm a skeptic of everything. And I really look at his experiments as being fun. And I generally agree with most of what he says about that stuff. Now, here's where it gets weird, okay? I'm totally on board with him about the religion. I'm totally on board with the criticisms. I'm totally on board with the skepticism. But then, what happens is all of a sudden, you get him being adamant that Donald Trump is literally worse than Hitler. I heard him today on David Pakman, which is what inspired me to find it. I've had these opinions about Sam for a long time, but I heard him on David Pakman's podcast today because somebody linked to him in a group of which I'm part on Facebook. So I listened to it. Pretty rational conversation, said the same things as usual. And as usual, Sam came up with the Trump thing, where he does not like Trump. There is nothing he likes about Trump. He compared in this podcast Trump to Osama bin Laden, and he was giving Osama bin Laden the moral edge. And hypothetically, he was thinking Osama bin Laden, he could at least see some human traits in Osama. Like he might have been moral and behaving morally. But Sam claims to have zero ability to spot any humanity in Donald Trump. For Sam, it's chaotic, it's all lies, everything's deception, there's no underpinning moral, there's no guiding philosophy. Trump, it lacks anything that a smart person or a moral person, somebody who's drilled down into morals and looking at brains and thought about morals and has done MDMA. For some reason, Sam is unable to see any value in Donald Trump. Sees him as bad. Now I sit here and I think, really? Really, Sam? I have my doubts about that, and it could go two ways. I don't know if Sam's telling the truth there. I really don't. One thing that's true about Sam is he's a white guy, right? And one of the reasons why I see him being so bold on Donald Trump, and Sam's greatest value to me is his ego. His ego and his fortitude to say what he wants to say, right? That's what's amazing about Sam. That's what's different between Sam and most of the people on the left, is that Sam demands that the conversation be held. He's a scientist. He wants to talk about it. He's a scientist of the brain. He's a scientist, a neuroscientist, a cognitive scientist. He wants to be part of the conversation, and he doesn't want to be shut out. And as a white guy, everybody knows that the left is trying to shut you out of the conversation. Well, Sam doesn't want to be shut out, and he's one of the few people with the cojones to not be shut out. So I love him. He speaks out against Islam. He speaks his mind. He got in trouble for having Charles Murray on his podcast. That was one of the first times he got in podcast. And so Charles Murray is also a neuroscientist type fella, a scientific fella who is really interested in whether or not IQ can be inherited. And you know where this goes. Because if it can, then you got to divide out the races and blah, blah, blah. And people don't want to have anything to do with whether or not this race has more IQ. And I've made a whole podcast about my doubts about the limitations of just IQ testing. I mean, you got to include dance. You cannot test IQ and not test dancing ability or singing ability alongside and averaging them out. I just think you can't. I don't know if Sam's ever even considered that. It doesn't sound like, if Sam is being truthful about his feelings about Donald Trump, and let me explain why I don't think why he might not be being truthful. He has really drilled down into cancel culture, and he's come out against it, and he's gotten in trouble for it. So he had Charles Murray on his podcast, and he was talking about Charles Murray being on his podcast with David Pakman, because David Pakman is on the left too. And David Pakman is also starting to fear the left and worry about the left, because nobody fears the left like the left, right? It's kind of like what Sam and I would tell you about Islam. Nobody fears Islam quite like a Muslim. Well, nobody fears the left like the left. Sam is on the left. David Pakman is on the left. They are prime candidates for cancel culture. They are both very prime candidates for being canceled. David Pakman is a total wuss as far as I can tell. I don't like him at all. Blech, ugh. I can agree with him on a bunch of stuff, but ultimately I don't like him because I find him to be dishonest, completely dishonest, and I think he lacks courage. Sam has more. Sam has much more courage than David Pakman, right? So you get these two guys, lefty guys, talking about cancel culture, and both of them are kind of, you got to know in the background of their minds, they're going, oh shit, when's my time up? When's my time up? When am I? And Sam's been dealing with it because they've all been trying to cancel. You remember when Ben Affleck lost his mind on Bill Maher, calling him a racist because he was criticizing Islam? That's gross, Ben Affleck was saying, not even understanding that Islam is not even a race. Total dipshit, But so Sam and David Pakman have probably both got this going on in their mind. And they're talking about cancel culture. They mentioned Dave Chappelle. And Sam, because he's really smart, knows, he goes, well, Chappelle gets away with it because why? He's not cancelable. Why? Because he's a black guy. And Sam talks about this, He talks about the unfairness of how certain things can be talked about if you have this color of skin. If you don't, then you can. Now, this means something to Sam, right? It means something to him because he's white. So he's the target of being shut up. They're not, they are trying to tell. I think Dave Chappelle is cancelable. They're trying to cancel him now. But it's not working, though. So Sam today, he's talking about how Dave Chappelle is uncancelable. And then in the same conversation, Sam mentions that he's made maneuvers in his life to be cancel-proof. Right? He doesn't mention what they are, but I think I know what they are. I think it's his stance on Donald Trump. I think that Sam knows that Donald Trump is his sacrificial lamb. He has got, as long as he comes out and constantly, as the worst critic of Donald Trump, and he is, because he's the one that's representing himself as being this neuroscientist. I know about the psychology of people. I'm basically a mind reader, but for real, because I have machines. I have machines that help me mind read, and I've looked at a lot, and I know what parts of his brain are firing when he does this. If he comes out as Donald Trump's staunchest critic, comparing him to Hitler, legitimizing all this to the left with his degrees, that kind of keeps his foot in the door. That's me am I being cynical there, or am I giving him credit for being strategic? Because who better to use as your sacrificial lamb as the leader of the free world? Seems like a smart move. That's where I think Sam probably is within his brain. He's done a couple of maneuvers. When he said that in the podcast, I've made I've taken certain actions in my life to be able to avoid being canceled. I think this is one of them. Being a huge critic of Donald Trump. I think that gives him a pass. I don't think if he was a Donald Trump fan, I am almost certain, I don't have a parallel universe where I can see if this is true, but I'm almost certain he would have never been on David Pakman's show or any of these shows if he was an ardent supporter of Donald Trump. Because you can't have the Charles Murray, you can't have the criticism of Islam, the criticism of, even if it goes with the criticism of Christianity, you can't have all that along with support for Donald Trump and still make the book rounds and still sell books and still not be canceled. It just doesn't work. For me, I see him as just holding that card because it's hard for me to believe that he isn't smart enough to be able to ascertain and see the actual value within Donald Trump. Not these tricky things he likes to, malign and say all the people that follow him just don't get it. And, he implores like just the same way religious people don't know. He brings all that background in there, but I don't think he's that dumb. He might be. So on the one hand, I'm presenting this defense of Sam, that he's smart enough, but he's using that as his way to continue to have a voice. And from all measurements that I can tell, most of what Sam involves himself in is pretty common, and this is most human beings. He's not different than most human beings this way, but it's in self-defense. The things that he finds valuable are intellectual discussions about taboo topics, about hard to understand topics. And he wants to be part of those, and he is more vulnerable than anybody as a white man these days. So he wants to maintain and preserve his seat at the table for conversation. He does not want to be left out. He doesn't want to be kicked out of the club. He loves the club. He thinks it's important. I do too. But if you see how he's really drills down in these topics, it's because he's defending that stuff. He's defending himself as a white Western man with Western cultural values, for the most part. Anyway, and so that's why I think he presents himself as being an absolute diehard critic of Donald Trump. That's the one hand. That's my defense. I'm repeating myself. Now, if he really believes that Donald Trump is evil incarnate, and that Osama bin Laden represents more humanity than Donald Trump, then, well, shit. That's trouble, because that undermines almost every other aspect of Sam Harris. Almost every other thing about Sam Harris, every other position he takes, is basically canceled out by this hardcore religious belief that he holds about Donald Trump. But I have a way to defend him on that too. Okay? Here's my defense for him for that glare. If it's a real blind spot, my defense for that blind spot would be that Sam Harris seemingly has never been involved in any profession or endeavor with real physical consequences. Nothing he has done, he has basically pursued the path that his parents were in. Acting, art, TV show. When Golden Girls was canceled, a few jobs went out of the way, but the world didn't change much. If you fail as an artist, things are fine. I know I've used this example a lot of times. If you fail as a plumber, you've got a room full of shit, literally. There are actual consequences for being wrong and doing your job incorrectly when you're a plumber or when you're a rocket scientist. You watch it go up, You watch it explode. You watch the debris rain down on the land, and you cringe and you wonder if it's going to hit or kill somebody. You know? It's the same thing happens when you're a transmission repairman. You know? You got to make those gears fit correctly, because if they don't, somebody's left stranded out on the freeway in 105-degree weather. You know? There's consequences. If his blind spot exists for real, and it's not just a put on to maintain his seat at the table, I think it's because Sam has never been involved in any meaningful endeavor where consequences occur. If he spent a year on a farm, that would change. If he started birthing calves and he started having to literally feed animals and care for them and raise them and fix fences and plow and till the soil, if he had to build a barn, you know, and if he had to manage a group of people building that barn, and he had to put the boards in the right place, and he had to do things so it wouldn't catch on fire, wouldn't tip over, wouldn't kill anybody. If he had to do anything of consequence, real consequences, his thinking wouldn't be the same on Donald Trump, if his thinking is even presented as real. And I have real reservations about that. And I wouldn't even fault him. If he's lying about Donald Trump and his feelings about him, I don't fault him. I fault the left for that more. I would see that as a defensive mechanism for him to survive. It would be, ironically, part of what Islam does to get their way in. They will lie and cheat, you know. They'll be your friend, and they'll represent their views as, they won't be honest to get their foot in the door, you know. Like a car salesman. Well, you look lovely today, the car salesman says. Meanwhile, you look like shit. You know what I mean? So, I don't, it's a strategy. And I don't fault the guy's strategy. I don't have tremendous respect for it, because why not just be honest? And I think this is where Milo would have something to say on this, and I do too. But it's that prestige culture. I think that Sam is probably addicted to prestige. He likes access to Bill Maher. He likes access to all these smart thinkers, and he doesn't want it to be cut off. Milo, much braver than Sam Harris in these regards. He doesn't mind being canceled. Soph, little 14-year-old Soph, much braver than Sam Harris in those regards. I think he's on par with Jordan Peterson. That's why they've been doing these tours. They're kind of the same way. I love Jordan Peterson and I love Sam. But I think both of them are a little bit more political and strategic about keeping their place in the prestige economy. You know, keeping that door cracked open so they don't get canceled. And they do that by simply misrepresenting certain things here or there, or keeping their mouth shut about certain things. Sam can't afford to keep his mouth shut about Trump, though. If he's aloof about Trump, he's canceled. What else does Sam have besides his fervent opposition to Trump and his psychoanalysis that he is more evil than the left even says he is? Sam literally doubles down, like he did on David Pakman's. He's like, call me, I have this thing where I predict what people are going to say as they're saying it. I don't do it with my mouth. I have a friend that does it, but he almost lip syncs you as you're talking, which is good because you can tell he's paying attention, right? But there's an element of anticipation there, and I have that element of anticipation too. When Sam today in this podcast was trying to compare Trump with somebody, I felt him wanting to compare him to Hitler, but he thought, no, that's too basic and too easy. So he pulled back and he went, Osama. Let me compare him to Osama, So he's doubling down. I think he chose Osama because Osama is more of a recent Hitler. He actually had a destruction, blew down some towers. And it was recent, 9/11, evoking recent popular imagery. So, yeah, that's what I think about Sam. There's another element to that we have to. Another one of these other aces up his sleeve, I think, is his, when he goes on about free will. That's when he looks the most insecure, by the way. If you watch him speaking, when he gets into his conversations of free will, which essentially sum up as there's no such thing as self. And that's what he does with it. That's the reason why he's big on meditation too. He thinks, his claim is that the point of meditation is to remind you of the illusion of self, that self doesn't really involve. I say bullshit to that. I say self is everything. I'm absolutely the other opposite direction. I believe that, I'm a radical individualist. I think self is the only thing that matters. It's the first, it's the primary, it's the building blocks upon which everything else is built. That your consciousness exists first and everything else exists out of it. Because as soon as your consciousness is gone, everything else is gone as far as you're concerned. Self-consciousness. That's the first. So he meditates to get rid of self, or so he says. I don't know. That might also be one of these strange conundrums he has that he can't resolve. And so that's maybe his non-spiritual version of self-sabotage and humility, which he doesn't seem to have when he talks about Donald Trump. In other words, it doesn't fit. He goes on, just like I do, about how certainty is really bad. But yet he's so certain about Donald Trump. Another conflict. Another reason to think that it's just partly strategy. What was I saying? But for free will. Yeah. One of the things that I was yelling at my TV with Sam, I was yelling at Sam on my TV, was when he talks about free will, he makes a big case that free will is non-existent because every choice you make is based upon a bunch of background information, things that have happened to you, and you're reacting to those. And so no choice is really a choice because so many influences have come in. And I'm thinking, that's dumb. Just because things influence a choice doesn't mean you don't have it. Right? You're influenced by a choice. That's fine. Stop there, Sam. My choices are influenced. I'm not a biochemical puppet, is the way he puts it. You're a biochemical puppet. You're a puppet of your chemicals. And it doesn't matter anyway, because if it seems like I have free choice, that's Occam's razor. I'm going to use it. I'm going to stick with that. And all his mental tricks to try to, convince you that you don't have free choice, it's a lot. That's not Occam's razor. That's piling on a lot of other unnecessary bullshit. If it seems like you have free choice, you probably do. But making that case for Sam and sticking with that provides, if you believe that, look, there might be a moral component to this. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt here. When you make that case, that's like making a scientific rationale for compassion. In the best case. In the best case, he's making a scientific rationale to be compassionate. And I say that because he uses himself these arguments that, why would a murderer choose to be a murderer? Why? Background information. He's kind of making a scientific rationale for compassion, for non-judgment. He's kind of making a scientific argument for Christian beliefs, He who is without sin casts the first stone. That's kind of where that lands, right? And I'm fine with that. I like that intent, if that's what it is. But the dangerous part with his rationale is it also excuses any behavior. Now he makes arguments, that it doesn't excuse it, but he doesn't make good arguments about it. He still is arguing for scientific morality He still wants scientists to posit morals and put out morals so that one day the term atheist will be as useless as it should be. And I make that same argument. I don't even call it atheist. I don't even call myself an atheist anymore. I call myself an apatheist, meaning I don't care what your ideas of God are. It doesn't make any difference. I care as much about your ideas on God as I care about your ideas on the Santa Claus or astrology or anything else. I don't care. Atheist. It applies to me, it applies to him, but it's a dumb word. I agree with him. It's a weak term. But having said that, with his positions on free will, that there is none, where's your accountability? There's no accountability. There's no responsibility. None. You're off the hook. You are off the hook. Do I believe Sam believes that? Fuck no. Fuck no, I don't believe that. You want to know why? Because Sam is obsessed with morality and being a good person. And I believe he is a good person. I can see it. You don't spend your whole life pursuing experiments on how to be a good person if you're not interested in being a good person. He understands that. He doesn't want to let himself off the hook for morals. He's not going to go out and start doing bad things. I guarantee you he's not. So what are we talking about here? What is my thesis on Sam Harris? My thesis on Sam Harris is that he is being stifled and stymied by these terrible motherfucking violent extremists who want to kill him for talking about things. And so he's made a concession to pretend to hate Donald Trump in order to be spared, to have his life, liberty, and pursuit spared their wrath. Weird, right? But why go after Donald Trump? Why? I'll tell you why. Because Donald Trump's the most powerful man in the world. If you could pick anybody, pick the guy in charge of everything. Pick the strongest one. It's actually there's even moral choice there. He didn't pick a small scapegoat. He didn't pick Michael Moore. Yeah, a fat guy who can't even control his impulses against a bag of potato chips. He picked the guy that's strongest. So, I hate it. And I don't respect Sam for doing it. I have more respect for Soph. I have more respect for Alex Jones on this topic. I have more respect for Milo. I have more respect for Gavin, because they haven't bent the knee at all. And Sam has bent the knee on the topic of Donald Trump. That's my theory. And I think I've got a lot of evidence. Anyway, what's your theory? Leave it in the comments below. As if you will. Nobody ever comments. Thanks for listening.